Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, the podcast with Dr. Susan Crockett. You are listening to episode number 21, Detoxing from Overwhelm, an interview with fellow certified life coach and newly certified master life coach, Neill Williams. This episode is dedicated to all of the working moms who struggle to do all the things and feel like we, are constantly failing at everything. Yes, I just dedicated this podcast to me and all the other working moms who are dealing with the overwhelm.
Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, where women learn to love their lives. Do you find yourself frustrated by society's expectations? Looking for practical advice on how to discover your talents and level up your life? You found the right place. Here's your host, U.S. News top doctor, robotic surgeon, and certified life coach, Dr. Susan Crockett.
So hello, my virtuosas. We are having a great day today. I'm so happy to be here to talk about this topic because I think overwhelm is something that affects most of us as working moms at one time or another, and Neill has some really beautiful ideas about overcoming the problem and kind of a very different approach. I'm really excited to share this with you. So, as always, even though I'm a physician, I might even be your doctor. This is not medical advice. You can call me Sue. You're going to be listening in today on just girl talk conversation between me and Neill Williams. She's so cool. So today I am sitting in my house. It is a beautiful sunny day outside. The tubers are on the river. So for those of you not familiar with river tubing, it is the hottest thing going right now. And I live on the Guadalupe River, or just off of it, actually. My neighborhood's on it. I live by it. And the Guadalupe River goes through New Braunfels, Texas. And this river is world famous for having inner tubers on it in the summertime. And it's not a huge, it's not Mississippi wide river, but it's a good sized river. And in the summertime, the inner tubes, you can almost walk across them. And everybody's out there. It's a great diverse group. They're social distancing 6 feet apart because of the tubes. Everybody's listening to music and having a great time. And it is one of my favorite things about Texas, let alone New Braunfels. So if you haven't ever been tubing, at least look us up and take a look at what I'm talking about. It's pretty cool. So on today's show, we are going to be talking about detoxing from overwhelm. Just like you would do a detox for your diet or detoxing from alcohol or drugs or anything else, we are going to talk about detoxing from the toxicity of overwhelm. Neill Williams is not only one of our Virtuoso coaching coaches, but she just got newly certified as a master life coach through the Life Coach School last month. I am so honored that she is interviewing with us today. She has her own private practice as a productivity coach, but she doesn't do productivity in the way that most of you may think of productivity. There is no time management and do this or do that. She's got some really interesting ideas and this totally different approach on managing overwhelm. So we are particularly talking about moms who are overwhelmed today. Maybe some of you aren't moms. I know a lot of my younger listeners aren't moms yet, but maybe you're overwhelmed with other things like school or finances or work or marriage or relationships or just life, all the things, right? All the things. So listen up, and I hope you enjoy the show. Here's Neill. All right. Hey, Neill, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Sue?
I'm so great. Thanks for agreeing to come on the podcast. I am so excited for our listeners to hear what you have to say about overcoming overwhelm. This is a huge topic.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to life coaching and to specifically into your niche and what you're teaching now? Everybody's got their own story. Let's hear yours.
Yeah, so I came to mine like a lot of us do. I was the typical overwhelmed working mom in corporate America, struggling to really balance momming with working. And I knew that there had to be a better way, but a lot of the advice that I was getting was to just quit my job or to work less hours. And that just wasn't a solution that was going to work for my family.
Yeah, it's so hard.
And so, yeah, I mean, at some point, there are some financial obligations. I actually happen to really like money. I liked my lifestyle. So I didn't necessarily want to give that part up, but I also didn't want to be miserable. And I just felt like those didn't have to be mutually exclusive. Like I felt like there was a way to be happy and balanced
Yeah.
and still work and be a mom.
So we're told that we can have it all. And yet when we're in that realm where we're having kids and husbands and dogs and jobs and we're in the middle of building career, it can seem really overwhelming. So I know a lot of my listeners struggle with those kinds of problems. And so I am really looking forward to hearing what you're going to teach us today. You've got a couple of points about overwhelm that you're going to share with us. But before we get to that, can you tell me about how you came to the life school and about your story there? What's that?
Yeah. So because I just felt like had to be a different solution here, I happened to run across Brooke Castillo's podcast, The Life Coach School, and fell in love with it immediately. And
Of course.
what she taught me, just like everyone else. And yeah, what she taught me about my brain and that I wasn't really a victim to my life, but I was really in charge of it.
Yeah.
It just changed everything for me.
So good.
And it was so good. And so I just knew through just that transformation that I got listening to her podcast, I knew that someday I was going to go through a certification with her and I was going to be one of her certified coaches.
Wow.
And it took me about 3 years to get there, but I finally did it. I just decided this is it. And in 2018, I went through certification, got certified.
Cool.
And of course, through that process, fell even more in love with the whole life coaching industry and that whole career and helping other people have transformations like I had.
It's such a fulfilling thing to do, to be able to watch people come in and use the tools that we've learned through certification to upgrade their lives. Like, yeah, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Cool. So you have your own practice?
I do. Yeah. So as part of that certification process, I decided, okay, I do want to do this work in the world. It was so powerful for me. I want to be a part of that for other people too. And I have the skills and the tools. And I just also felt like a responsibility to be teaching and helping other people with the things that I now knew how to do for myself.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started my own practice on the side, still working in corporate America. And then I also decided to throw my hat in the ring for Master Coach certification.
Wow.
Never really thinking in my wildest dreams that I'd be accepted, and I was.
That's awesome.
And so that was amazing, an amazing, amazing process. And through that, I completely up-leveled myself again in my whole life. And my business just took off, I think, because of my own internal up-level that happened. It manifested in the external world as a really full one-on-one practice.
Fantastic.
Which has been amazing. Yeah.
Cool. So you're one of our Virtuosa coaching coaches, and then you also have your own private practice. At the end of the podcast, I want to give you a chance to tell the listeners where they can find you if they want to work with you, and tell them a little bit more about your access, okay?
That sounds great. Thanks.
You're welcome. But let's get into the meat of the topic today. So overwhelm, this is a really popular thing. Like everybody's stressed out and overwhelmed these days. So why don't you talk a little bit about what that is and how that looks in your coaching practice when you're helping people?
Yeah. Well, most of my clients come to me as the too busy, overwhelmed working mom. Most of them are entrepreneurs, but I also coach a fair amount of corporate moms as well. And so they just identify it. It's almost like we hear so much about chronic anxiety, but for my people, it's a lot of chronic overwhelm. Like that feels like that just a part of their everyday life. It's one of those feelings that's just with them when they wake up in the morning and they go to bed with it. It's just like a constant. And at some point, they just get frustrated with that constant overwhelm. And
so is it like the always feeling like there's too much to do and not enough of me and you just leave me alone?
All of that.
Yeah.
too much to do, not enough time. Everybody needs something from
Yeah.
me all the time.
Yeah.
Like I never get to just be with myself or by myself. Like there's just always, it's just too much.
Huh.
And so your listeners know that overwhelm is a feeling if they've listened to the podcast for any amount of time.
Mhm.
And a feeling is really created by a thought. So it's triggered in the brain and then it flows through the body as a vibration. So when we talk about chronic overwhelm, what we're really saying is we have some habitual thought patterns in our brain, some habitual overwhelm thoughts that are happening for
Right.
us.
Cool. So, from a medical perspective, I'm imagining that this is what translates from thoughts into that feeling of overwhelm, which is like quote unquote stress, where we see elevated cortisol levels and weight gain and all of that stuff that comes from chronic stress that wears and tears on the body. So, this is a really important conversation for us to have, I think, because you're sitting there helping these women that are coming to you directly with the problem, but I can't help but think from my perspective as a physician that this is like something that 80% of my patients, I'm a gynecologist, my patients are all women. So
Yeah.
they're all dealing with like these stress levels. So cool. So how do you approach this with your clients? What do you do to help them? Tell us a little bit about that.
So first, it's awareness about what that is. So just recognizing that it's a feeling, which is a vibration in your body, and understanding what your particular body, what the vibration is. So I'm just going to explain as an example. I'll tell you, for me, it was like a weight on my chest and shoulders and a pit in my stomach, like
Got it.
just this almost nauseous feeling in my stomach. And then like I'm just being weighed down, like heavy weights on my shoulders.
Yep.
And so the first thing to realize is that is what overwhelm is. Like it's nothing beyond that, beyond the experience of this vibration in our body. So it's not actually that bad. So the experiencing the feeling of overwhelm is not that big of a deal. So understanding that at first, I think relieves some of the pressure
Yeah.
and gives us a little bit of freedom and peace that, oh, it's okay. I'm just experiencing this heaviness on my shoulders right now or in the pit in my stomach.
So you are drawing them into like consciousness of their body and how they're feeling now. And people might have different feelings. Like I'm trying to think about how I experience overwhelm. I don't feel that heaviness. I feel more tingling in my hands and sometimes a headache or in my shoulders, like really tightness. So, but I love what you're saying about how a feeling is just a vibration in your body. Like it doesn't do anything else. It's just there. And it may be unpleasant, but it's not going to hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah. So understanding, and I think it's important for us to get into our bodies. So your clients may be like mine and myself, where I'm very cerebral, right? Like everything is like from the neck up.
Yeah.
I like to look into my brain and understand that. So when someone tells me to look into my body, at first I was like, I don't know about that, right? Like I don't know if that's helpful, but it actually is. And here's one of the reasons for your people who are very cerebral and very intellectual and like to like logic,
Yeah.
apply logic to everything. I think one of the great things about understanding our feelings is so sometimes we can notice how we're feeling in our body before we can see the thought that's creating it in our brains.
Oh, that's good.
So when you notice that you're feeling overwhelmed, you can just, I like to hit like, remember that old commercial? I think it was like a Staples commercial or something. It was like the easy button.
Yeah.
Like just like, okay, so I can hit the button and then that reminds me to look into my brain to see what overwhelming thought I'm having.
Like, where's
because
that
I know
coming
I'm
from?
overwhelmed right now. Yes. What am I thinking about that's causing this overwhelm right now? Can I find that thought? Because sometimes we have like 60,000 thoughts a day. Sometimes it's very hard for us to access those, to see them.
Yeah.
So I think the body's a good signal for that.
Yeah. I never thought about using my body and doing that in reverse. Like I think most of the time of when we think about the thought feeling relationship, I think of it top down, like the thoughts first, then the feelings. And I'm not sure that we've actually taught this on the show yet about the feelings and the vibrations in the body and then working backwards to try to find the thought. So the thought's really the problem.
Mm-hmm. The thought is the problem. It's just that when we're in it, sometimes it's hard to see the thought. So the body gives you a signal that there's something going on. And if you pay attention to your body, you might be able to figure out what's happening in your mind that's causing the sensation in your body of the overwhelm.
That's great.
So awareness is always number one. Like we have to start with awareness,
right?
To know what's happening, to know what it is we even want to change or need to change, or if we want to change anything. We don't have to change this, of course. So that's the first thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that what overwhelms just a feeling? And it's not that overwhelm itself is that bad. That's not the real problem with overwhelm. Experiencing the feeling is not going to kill us. It's not going to cause any really physical damage. It doesn't feel great, but we can sustain that. And
so what is the real problem? Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, great. That is the perfect next question. So the real problem with it is, as your listeners probably know, because they know the CTFAR model, our feelings fuel our actions, our behaviors, what we do, what we don't do. So when we think about using overwhelm for our fuel, like if that's what we're experiencing on a daily basis, you think about it's like filling up your car with watered down gas.
Wow.
Right? Like it's not going to perform as well.
That is powerful.
As it would with high octane gas.
Right. And so if you're never stopping to look at that feeling and back up to the thoughts to figure it out, it's like you're just fueling your body with bad stuff all day long. That is eye-opening. That's mind blown. That's cool. Just went.
I love it. Love it.
Okay. So, wow. So the fuel, it's fueling your actions and then your reality. So, oh my goodness. Okay. So how do you help people work through this? What do you help them do with it? How do you get good fuel?
Yeah, right. So we kind of want to change the fuel. And because I'm a productivity coach, this is where this all comes into the work that I do, because to be highly productive, you want to fuel yourself with the best that you can, right? Like the highest quality fuel you can get. And so once you're aware of the overwhelming thoughts that you're having, the thing that's triggering the overwhelm, that's when you can start to redirect your brain to think something else on purpose that creates a higher octane fuel for you. So if we think about it in the productivity space, and the way that I believe productivity works into our life, which I think is a beautiful pairing to virtuosa, is it is the way that we create the best life for ourselves, right? To be highly productive means we're going after our goals, we're creating our best life for us. And so to access the high octane fuel to help propel us towards that, we have to think about, what do we want to feel?
Yeah.
Because we actually get to choose that, which seems crazy, right? It seems like it's crazy to think that I get to decide how I want to feel in any moment, and actually every moment of my day.
You know what? It seems crazy, but I was never taught that until I was introduced to life coaching. And that's one of the really powerful things about it, is you get to choose if you want to stay there, but you get to choose what else you want to think. And what I really love about what you're teaching is you're not telling people how to reorganize or reprioritize their life. Like, you're not giving them a schedule so that they can get de-overwhelmed or unoverwhelmed, right? You're working at it from a very different perspective, which is, how do you want to show up? Like, what would your best fueling for guiding your actions then be? So that's so cool.
Yeah. And this is why I come at productivity from a completely different standpoint than just like the tactics of time management and scheduling. Like, I never even talk about time management. I really talk about personal management. And this is part of it, right? This is me controlling myself in my hours. And that's how I get to my highest productivity. Yeah. So you think about, like, do I want to feel motivated? Do I want to feel confident? Do I want to feel excited or energized? Like, what is the fuel that I want to give myself right now? And what are some thoughts I can be thinking that create that fuel for myself?
Cool.
And that is really the way to get to the higher octane fuel, which, like, if you're, ever think about how you show up when you're overwhelmed versus how you show up when you're energized.
Oh, totally different. Like,
totally different.
Same
right?
set of things to get done, but totally different. Yep. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And you probably get them done in a much more efficient way because you're energized, you're fueling yourself at a very high level. And so your productivity, your output is much higher.
And you're making better choices.
Yes, totally. And then if that's going to show up in your R line, right? Your results are going to look somewhat different. Maybe you have the same things created, but you created them in a smaller amount of time, or maybe the quality of them is at a totally different level than if when you came at it from overwhelm. Like there's going to be a difference in your R line when you fuel from a different emotion.
Exactly. Well, this is so awesome. So the take home that we want to leave our listeners with today about all of this is give me a take home nugget. What's your quote, your nugget for this?
Yeah, I think the best way to think about it is the analogy that we gave earlier. How do you want to fuel yourself? What emotion do you want to put in your tank today? And you have to keep redeciding that throughout your day. So it's not as if you get up in the morning and you think, okay, well, today I'm just going to be excited. And you think an exciting thought in that moment, right? We have to keep doing the work of fueling ourselves. So you have to keep redirecting your brain. If you're in the habit of overwhelm, it's because you're in the habit of overwhelming thoughts. And
Wow.
so to break that habit, you have to think thoughts that are not overwhelming.
So you just have to do it every day. You have to be constantly catching yourself when you're doing that habit of overwhelm to go oh, is this really what I want to be doing? And then grabbing out those other thoughts that you've predetermined ahead of time throughout your day.
Yeah, exactly.
It's awesome.
I like to think about it like a detox. Like once you become you kind of get addicted to this emotion of overwhelm and the overwhelming thoughts that you're thinking. And so think when you're detoxing, think about it like you're doing it slowly over time. So
Right.
it's not as I don't want your listeners to think well, tomorrow, every single minute, I'm going to choose a thought that's going to make me not feel overwhelmed,
Just
right? That's
not
not
overwhelmed.
realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, can you commit to maybe 30 minutes where you're choosing to think on purpose in a way that fuels you to be motivated or confident or excited? And then maybe for an hour the next day, right? We are going to do this over time, just like you're detoxing off of anything else. Detoxing off the overwhelm is going to be done slowly over time if you want it to be done in a very long-term, sustainable way.
I really like that because it really takes the pressure off of us for the perfectionism and for getting it right,
Yes.
right away. So thank you so much, Neill, for coming on the show with me today. Excellent lesson. So much fun to hear your ideas and, just a different perspective on approaching this. I want to make sure that our listeners know how to find you other than on virtuosacoaching.com because you're one of our great coaches. But tell a little bit more about what you're doing in your private practice and how they can find you after the show if they want to work with you.
Yeah. So if they want to learn more about productivity and personal management, kind of in that arena, I have all kinds of great information on my podcast called Unbusy Your Life.
Cool.
So they can tune into that for lots of great free resources.
And we'll put all of these, by the way, in the notes, the transcription notes, but also just in the podcast notes below that with all the links for our listeners.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then they can also reach me at my website, www.neillwilliams.com. So Neill is Neill, or on social at Neill Williams Coach.
Sweet.
And then the last thing, my one-on-one practice is pretty full. I would take people on a wait list, but I'm transitioning to groups. So I am launching a group program called the Productive and Peaceful Life.
Perfect.
And anyone who's interested can just go to my website to find out more details. Or if they wanted to send me an email, they could do that and they can access that through the website.
Great. When is your launch for the group coaching?
The first group will be August 1st, 2020.
August. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for coming and joining us. And I'm so glad to get to know you a little bit and hear about the managing overwhelm. And I'm going to say bye. So thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Bye.
Bye. Okay. Isn't that amazing? So here's what I've shown you today. We've talked about overwhelm, but not from a way of fixing it from what you have to do or that action line. This is totally different. We have had a good conversation with Neill about using our brain and our thoughts and putting the right kind of fuel into our body emotionally to be able to handle the otherwise overwhelming tasks of life. I think that's just incredible. So now we are coming to the part of the show that is my favorite part of the show. That's what we're listening to and reading. Neill and I had a really interesting conversation about this because at first when I asked her what she's listening to, she said, well, piano music, my son plays, and we listen to a lot of relaxing classical and all that. And I was like, I don't know if my listeners would like that. And then we did the podcast and I thought, I know exactly the music for this podcast. And it's got a story behind it. So the song is called In the Meadows. It's by a composer and pianist named Stephen Richard Thomas Brown. We're going to put some links for you in the footnotes from the podcast. It's from an album he wrote called Songs for the 21st Century. Now, the way I first came across this is there was a YouTube video circulating with underwater footage from Fiji and Tonga. We'll put that in there too. So this underwater footage has like 33 million views. 33 million, can you imagine? And this is the background music for the video. It is beautiful. And if you're overwhelmed, this music is calming and peaceful, and so is the YouTube video. I could stare at it all day. It's beautiful. So you can download the music for free at Bandcamp. We'll put the link, StephenRichardThomasBrown.bandcamp.com. We'll put the full link in the post-podcast notes. But here's the story. So somebody had shared with me this Dakuaka's Garden. No, I'm not saying that right. The underwater footage video, the YouTube video with the 30 million views. And I just absolutely fell in love with the music. I thought it was so beautiful. And so I Googled the composer, and at that time he had a website. I can't find it now to put in the notes, but I actually wrote to him and asked him if I could purchase the sheet music because I used to be a musician, in a life before I was a doctor and all of that. My first love was music, so I started playing piano when I was like 4 years old. And anyway, we corresponded back and forth, and he ended up selling me a copy of the sheet music, and he put it all in this really pretty little notebook, and it's sitting right now. It's sitting in my library, my study where I'm doing my podcast it's got this big bookshelf on it with my piano next to me. It's actually my piano from childhood. And I've got a section of the bookcase set aside for music. And this music, which is signed by him as the composer, is sitting like at arm's length from me. So when I was thinking about what music to do for today's podcast, that came to mind. And I thought, you know what, that is such a beautiful little reminder about our connectivity in life. And, I hadn't thought about that music for a little bit, and it just seemed just perfect to share with y'all today. So I noticed when I was looking for his website that you can now download the music, the sheet music, for any of those that are musicians or have kids that are musicians. The sheet music is available as a very inexpensive download from Sheet Music Plus. So we will put that link in the post-op notes too. Did I just say post-op notes? We will, that's funny. You should probably leave that in there. We will put that in the post-show notes too. Enjoy. What we've been reading, Neill is working on reading The 12-Week Year, Get More Done in 12 Weeks Than Others Do in 12 Months by Brian P. Moran and Michael Lennington. So, of course, as a productivity coach, this is a really interesting book. If you're interested in figuring out how to do more with less time, then check it out. You can find it on Amazon. And then when I asked Neill what she's watching or like Netflixing or whatever, she said, you know what, actually, I've been watching a life coach this week named Trudy LeBron. Her name is spelled Trudy, Trudi. Last name is LeBron, Lebron. Her website is trudylebron.com. This is fascinating because Trudy is a diversity, racial equity coach. She's an educator and a coach. And she does training about cultural competence, racial equity, diversity. She is a biracial Latina. She's racially Black and white and ethnically Latina. So she is a brilliant, brilliant coach. And she is doing a lot of teaching these days due to the changes that are happening in our society regarding racism and racial inequality. You can find her not only on her website, but also her podcast. It's called the Business Remixed Podcast because she does a lot of business coaching. She has Instagram and Facebook pages, and we will put those in the links as well. So there you have it. Next week, we're going to be interviewing Coach Robin Ola about how worry and anxiety affect weight loss and what to do about it for all of us struggling with that. That's an awesome podcast coming up next week. I hope you'll join me for that, and I will see you in episode 22. Have a wonderful week. Love always, Sue.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Becoming Virtuosa. If you want to find out more, come check out virtuosacoaching.com. That's virtuosa with an A, coaching.com. See you next week.